Welcome back to the Bright Podcast. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day and hope that everybody made it safely through the storms that we had this past night. And just thank you so much for everyone who is listening, and just thank you so much for all the support you've shown through all the different social media videos and posts and everything, and just especially for listening to the podcast. Just thank you so much. That means so much to me, and I hope that you're not just doing that just to support me, but you're doing that so that you can grow and you can mature in your faith and shine brighter in this world. And I hope that we all can make sure that our hearts are in the right place in every aspect of our life, and which is why I really enjoy this season of the Bright Podcast, because of what we're talking about. We're checking our heart in every aspect of our life, and I hope that you've been doing that and following along with what we've been doing. It's been a very beneficial study for me as well. Over the past, past few weeks, and for the next several weeks, it's going to be an awesome how we can all grow together and have our hearts in the right place at the right times. And hope that we can be all in at all times at every aspect of our life. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. The topic of today is, where's your heart when living? That might sound simple, where's your heart when living, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. Where your heart is when you're living, each and every single day, where your heart is. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all that He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. That comes from Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Today I want to talk about this verse along with a couple other verses, as well as a few quotes and some stories, a story and then a personal story as well, to talk about how our hearts can be all in at all times when we're living, as our daily walk of life, how our hearts can be all in at all times. As we go about our day, how do we carry ourselves? Do we walk with our head down? Do we smile? Do we ignore everyone we see? How do we present ourselves to others? And more importantly, how do we present ourselves to God in every day that we live? And so last week, I got to be a part of a mission trip to the Ohio State University to work with the Buckeyes for Christ group. And it was such a wonderful learning experience, and I just grew so much from this past week. On a campus with 65,000 students, our small group of 25 students from Friedharden stood out. Almost everyone there on campus walked by had their headphones in and their heads down. They did not look excited about where they were coming from or where they were going to. And our group stood out. In our small groups that we split out into, we stood out. We were smiling, laughing, and joking around while we were walking around, and everyone seemed to notice. As we were trying to hand out flyers for people to get them interested in Buckeyes for Christ and then get them to come to our events, we saw that most everyone had little to no interest in us at all. They would either straight up ignore us and not even break a stride as we tried to hand them a flyer, or others would be a little nice and say, "Sorry, I don't have the time," or "Sorry, I'm on my way to class." But there were the select few that took the time out of their day to listen to us and hear what we had to say. And so, the lesson I learned from that is that I do the same thing. I call myself a Christian. I have a podcast where I'm constantly talking about being a light, being a bright light in this world, yet I do the same thing. I do the same thing even at a Christian university, where I walk by people at school and I ignore them, I look down, I look at my phone, just like the people at Ohio State. As we were there during the day, I was complaining about how these people that were ignoring us were being stubborn and rude. But then, later on that day, I realized that I do the exact same thing. And I really needed to take a step back and check my heart, because I cannot be a light in this world if I constantly have my head pointed down. The easiest way to show your light is to smile at someone that you don't know. Ask someone how they are doing, because you need to walk with your head held high, because even though we are all poor sinners and beggars, Jesus came into our life and lit up the whole world. The least we can do is smile, because there's no reason not to smile because of the great love that Jesus has shown us. Come now, you who say, "Today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, If the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. It comes from James chapter 4, verse 13 through 15. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Life is a vapor, a mist. Our life is just a couple of trips around the sun. Our time we spend on earth cannot even compare to the time that eternity is. If we do not live every day like this, if we do not live every day to the fullest, then we are wasting our time. From the famous movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the famous quote says, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it." If we walk through life with our head pointed down, we are going to miss out on so many opportunities to spread the love of Jesus. We have to stop around and look to see this beautiful life that God has given us. And we can only live a beautiful life because of the love and the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. Jesus only lived 33 years on this earth, and yet he lived his life to the fullest. He lived every day with the end in mind. If we do not live every day with the end in mind, then we really need to check our heart. Our sole purpose on this earth is to love God with everything that we've got, with our heart, with our soul, with our mind, our strength. To love our neighbors as ourselves, and then to make disciples. If we do these things, then we can enter into our eternal home in heaven one day. If we are not constantly thinking about where we are going to spend our eternity, then we need to change how we are living. We need to change how our hearts are when we are living. And a story that I want to tell is something that goes along with this. You may have heard this, you may not have. I've heard it a couple times, and I've told it once in a sermon before, but now I'm going to tell it to you again. Tell it again because it is so vital for us to understand, and just has an impactful meaning, and it really sits home with me. It's about a man named Carl McCunn. He was a 35-year-old photographer, an adventurer, just outdoorsman, just loved being in the outdoors. He decided that one day he was going to go on an adventure, that he would go out into the tundra, to the middle of nowhere, Alaska, to photograph the wildlife and the landscape. He made plans with the pilot to drop him off in the absolute middle of nowhere, hundreds of miles away from the nearest person, so that he was completely alone and cut off from humanity. He spent 5 months alone with 500 rolls of film, photography equipment, firearms, and 1,400 pounds of provisions. He also had a journal that he would write down the things that he did and the things that he saw. So eventually, being in Alaska, it got very cold, and Carl began to run out of food. And one day, he thought to himself, did I plan with the pilot to pick me up at any point? Because, he's out in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, hundreds of miles from the nearest person. He has no way to communicate or contact anyone. So the only way he's getting out is if he made plans with the pilot to pick him up at a certain time. And with his supplies dwindling, his concern grew. And what he wrote in his journal really impacts me. He wrote, I think I should have used more foresight about arranging my departure. I'll soon find out. His body was found in a frozen tent by a state trooper months after Carl had written that. I think I should have used more foresight about arranging my departure, he wrote. I'll soon find out. How much thought do we put into our eternity? How much thought do we put into our daily walk of life? How much thought do we put into our everyday actions that we do? We must live every day with our hearts all in, at all times, and especially with our eternity in mind. Our hearts are made full by the life and the love of Jesus, and our job is to show and tell others about that life and that love that Jesus did, that Jesus lived and Jesus showed. Jesus lived every day of his life knowing that he was going to die. We must do the same. We must live every day not in fear of death, but with joy and hope of our heavenly home one day. And so, one more short story before we close. About a man who walked with God, about a man who lived every day to the fullest, a man whose heart was all in at all times. Paul Gerber was a great man, a great friend to me, a great mentor, and most importantly, a great man who loved Jesus and a man who loved telling people about Jesus. Paul Gerber was from South Africa, and my family was extremely lucky to have him be a part of our family. He did so much work for the church and for Jesus here in the States, in South Africa, and all over the world. And almost it was like every other year, Paul and his wife Hetty would come up to the States and visit with our church and all the churches that supported him, and he would stay. They would stay with my grandparents, and we got to spend several Christmases and Thanksgivings and a couple summers together, and it was a super awesome family that got to be a part of our family. And so it was a year that he was going to be coming up, and this was last fall. And so while I was at Freed, my grandparents, Paul and his wife Hetty, came up for the day to visit, and I got to spend one more day with him. So he was, doing all his mission reports at some churches close to Freed, and they came up for the day. We got lunch and dinner, got to spend some time with them. But that night after they left, that would be the last time that I would ever see Paul Gerber again. The next week, I got a text from my dad saying that I needed to call him. And so I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't know exactly what was wrong. And so after chapel on that Friday, I went and sat under the bell tower and called my dad. He told me that Paul Gerber had not woken up that morning. It was a total shock to me and my family. It hurt. It was a rough couple days and weeks leading up to the funeral. But after a talk with one of my best friends, I realized something. What my friend said to me was that, when we were talking about it, is that he talked about Enoch, and how Enoch walked with God and was taken up to heaven, and how Paul had done the same thing. How Paul had done so much work for the kingdom in his life, and how he had always walked with God every step of the way. And how after several months from his passing, I still think of him regularly, and how he's inspired me so much to do what I want to do and to be who I am today. Paul walked with God every single day of his life. He lived his life all in at all times. There wasn't a moment where he wasn't smiling. We should live the same way. We need to be all in at all times. Smile at someone you don't know. Be kind to people. Live your life to the fullest. Walk with God every step of the way. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, all fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. When all of God's singers get home to a city with foundations firm as the eternal throne, when we all get to heaven, we will be home, sweet home. Remember who you are. Remember that you are a child of God, and that every day is a great day to be a child of God. Remember to be all in at all times as you're walking to class, as you're walking to work, as you're driving around, whatever. Be all in at all times. Smile to people, wave to somebody, ask somebody how they're doing. Be kind to people, show love to others. Because our life is like a vapor, a mist that's here for a short amount of time, and we don't know how much longer we have. If we don't take advantage of every single day to show that love, the love of Jesus to others, then we are just wasting our time. Don't waste your time. Remember who you are. Remember that you are a light in this world. Remember to be all in at all times and to check your heart before you do anything.